The door to the pigsty cracked open, revealing a short figure wrapped in a cloak and wearing a round, tightly fitting cape. After a moment's hesitation, the woman crossed the threshold. The reeking man threw himself at her, slashing forcefully with his knife, and tumbled to his knees as the knife met with no resistance, passing through the figure's throat as though a cloud of smoke. Because the figure really was a cloud of smoke, one which already was starting to disperse, but before it completely vanished, another figure burst into the pigsty, indistinct, dark and nimble as a weasel. Dandilion saw it through the cloak of the lantern man, jump over the reeking one, saw something glistening in its hand, and hear the reeking man wheeze and choke savagely.
No, 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 no.
Then Rhines attacked. The spell he cast illuminated the darkness with a bluish flash in which Dandilion saw a slender woman wearing man's clothes, gesticulating strangely with both hands. He only glimpsed at her for a second, before the blue glow disappeared with a bang and a blinding flash. Rhines fell back with a roar of fury and collapsed onto the wooden pigsty walls, breaking them with a crash. The woman in man's clothing leaped after him, a stiletto flashing in her hand. The pigsty filled with brightness again, this time golden, beaming from a bright oval which suddenly appeared in the air. Dandilion saw Rhines spring up from the dusty floor, leap in the oval and immediately disappear. The oval dimmed, but before it went out entirely, the woman ran up to it, shouting incomprehensibly, stretching out her hand. Something crackled and rustled, and the dying oval boiled with roaring flames for a moment. A muffled sound, as if coming from a great distance, reached Dandilion's ears. A sound very much like a scream of pain.
Oh! Oh!
Could have been a badass.
Ever since I watched the second season of The Witcher, I just can't get the scene out of my head. I was thrilled to see the adaptation of the Dandilion Interrogation, because of its excellent portrayal in Blood of Elves, the first part of the Witcher saga. Unfortunately, the show counterpart is a prime example on how to mess everything up, from the characterization of 3 major characters, and we'll get to all of them, over reasonable logistics of the scene, to just the most basic logic. Juxtaposing the two will make this painfully clear. Let's start out with Rhines, but to do so, we need to go back to where the whole exchange started, to the night before. In both the book and the show, we see Dandelion performing in front of a crowd, as he usually does. However, unbeknownst to him, there's someone in the audience looking for him. Rhines. But in the next scene of the show, Dandelion is just being held hostage by him? How did that happen? Don't know, but I kinda care. Especially since Dandilion doesn't seem to remember either. So how did you end up here? Are we supposed to believe he was the only one to black out and Rhines just had to wait until everyone left? Even the guy who runs the place? Or anything similar to that? Seems unlikely. It almost feels like we're missing something. Well, I doubt you'd be surprised if I told you the book had an additional scene in which Rhines paid Dandilion a visit to his room. And it puzzles me why said scene wasn't adapted. First of all, most of the logistical problems would have been solved by doing so. The likes of, how did you end up there? Why is no one here? The owner, the staff, anyone? Why aren't you in a more private place to interrogate and torture someone? Would be a shame if someone just so happened to stumble into your interrogation, wouldn't it? And while we're at it, in the book, Yen was also in the audience, waiting for a good time to approach Dandilion. When he disappeared for quite a while, she had a good reason to start looking for him while already being in the right place. Slightly convenient perhaps, but a million times better than being told to look for missing men in taverns by a random whore. Anyway, I was talking about Ryan's. What's even more important, the scene is doing a really good job in characterizing both him and Dandilion. Characterization that's just missing from the show. You'd assume characterizing a new character would be important. Oh well, not to Lauren. Instead, this weird shaving scene made it into the show for some ungodly reason. During the time we have with Ryan's, we are shown a cruel person who takes pleasure in suffering of others. While in the book, there's so much more to him. While still being cruel, he's not willing to take any chances when it comes to making sure he succeeds. Instead of taking Dandilion hostage immediately, Ryan's has a conversation with him. He's asking questions, complimenting the poet's skill, and doing his best to simply appear interested instead of hostile. He's fishing for details about the background of his work, while trying to appear innocent. But Dandilion, even though he's someone who loves the attention of other people, sees right through all of it, because he's not a useless idiot like some other guy.
You don't get to play damsel in distress. That's my job.
What I'm trying to say, they're both quite smart, which makes them much more interesting to follow along for a story, and in Ryan's case, we also have a much bigger reason to be worried for Siri. Unfortunately, both of them being smart is something you'd never guess from watching the show. Them being smart is also reflected by the dialogue written by Sapkowski. Dialogue which for the most part never made it into the show, which is a shame because on the list of things missing in the show, good dialogue is definitely up there, and so are intelligent characters. Or you'll just throw another fuck in there, just in case the audience forgot they were watching a mature series. I'm sure it will help. Too bad it's necessary to be intelligent and have talent in order to write intelligent characters.
Fuck.
Anyway, back to the book.
All I need is one small piece of information. What really happened to Cyrilla, the queen of Sintra's granddaughter? Many people claim she was killed during the siege of the town. There are even eyewitnesses supporting this claim. From your ballad, however, it would appear that the child survived. I'm truly interested if this is your imagination at work or the truth. True or false? I'm extremely pleased you're so interested. Dandilion smiled broadly. You may laugh, Master, whatever your name is, but that was precisely what I intended when I composed the ballad. I wish to excite my listeners and arouse their curiosity. True or false? Repeated Ryan's coldly. If I were to give that away, I would destroy the impact of my work. Goodbye, my friend. You have used up all the time I could spare you, and two of my many inspirations are waiting there, wondering which of them I will choose.
Dandilion actively tries to get out of the confrontation by pursuing an end of the conversation. Ryan's, however, didn't achieve his goal yet and realizes Dandilion is seeing through his mixture of flattery and questioning. He goes out of his way to not answer his questions properly and asks him to leave. So Ryan's finally starts to threaten him with violence and torture. At this point, Dandilion puts on an act, trying to seem more confident than he actually is, trying to not appear intimidated. But he knows he's not talking himself out of the situation and is already preparing himself to get away from his persecutor. After waiting for the right moment, he jumps through a secret door behind the tapestry into a tunnel. And he was just about to get away if it wasn't for a paralyzing spell cast by Ryan's, who, unbeknownst to him, turns out to be a wizard. And now we are finally caught up with the show. Dandilion gets captured and tied up by Ryan's. If he wasn't before, now Dandilion is scared for his life. But the show just can't help itself. Even in a situation like this, Dandilion is still arrogant. He's still making jokes and witty remarks.
Hello? Is anyone there? Well, that's unsettling.
I am a bard, I am brilliant.
Because of that, the tone of the scene is just all over the place. The issue at hand is that the writers obviously took inspiration from both the scenes before and after Dandilion's escape attempt and combined them into a single scene. But the circumstances and the tone under which the conversations in those scenes took place are entirely different, and therefore combining them into one conversation leads to a weird mixture of tone. But alright, let's get into the interrogation itself.
I asked you a question under much pleasanter circumstances than these. Now you are going to answer all my questions, and in far less pleasant circumstances. Am I right? Dandilion nodded eagerly.
And Dandilion starts talking as soon as he can. He's obviously not just giving all the information away, but he wouldn't dare to refuse to give answers to Ryan's outright anymore, which in turn gives Ryan's the opportunity to dissect his claims, showing this is not the first interrogation he has conducted.
I don't know where it is, the troubadour said quickly. I'm not lying. I really don't know. Too quick, Dandilion, too quick. Ryan smiled ominously. Too eager. You're cunning but not careful enough. You don't know where it is, you say. But I warned, you know what it is.
In the show, however, there are never any interesting interactions between the two of them. No back and forth. Ryan isn't trying to expose Dandilion's half-truth in order to figure out what's really going on. Their dialogue never goes further than Dandilion making a claim and Ryan saying that he doesn't believe him and that his songs suggest he knows something. Neither of them is given any clever dialogue and therefore a chance to characterize and develop their characters in a meaningful way is totally squandered. But what frustrates me the most about the whole scene is how they got Dandilion's character completely backwards. His reaction to being tortured encapsulates the dissonance between the book character and his adaptation perfectly. In the book, he doesn't have the mental fortitude to withstand torture, and he knows that.
Besides, I like seeing people's eyes pop out of their sockets from pain, and you are going to tell me anyway. Dandilion knew he would. The rope secured to his ankles grew taut. The bucket of lime scraped along the ground.
And meanwhile in the show, you know what? I think I'll leave that one to Lauren.
The torture scene in our world actually goes on a little bit longer than it does in the books. And so he is willing to go as far as having his fingers burnt by Rience in order to protect Geralt and to protect Ciri.
And they really have the nerves to call the behind the scenes material by the books. That's some next level gaslighting. So he's the goofy sidekick of the main character who always gets into trouble and causes problems, but when it truly matters, his heart is in the right place and he will do the right thing. That sounds like the most common and boring trope he could have gone for. In the book, however, despite his shortcomings, if you want to call them that, he's getting tortured after all, he still shines with his abilities. He might not be a fighter, but just like he has a talent to get into trouble, he usually knows how to get out of it as well. He's portrayed as clever, witty, confident, and resourceful. And even when he gets caught and fears for his life, he still doesn't lose sight of what's important. He knows he won't withstand the torture, yet he still picks up on clues about who Rience is and what his motivations might be. After he gets rescued by Yen, he tells her about the phrase "Battle for Sintra" being used by Rience. Despite the immense pressure he had to be under, he still recognizes this is something only a Nilfgaardian would say. And it makes perfect sense that he would be the one to figure this one out, since he's a poet. Someone who's making a living by being good with words. But after all of this, I still want to give credit where credit's due, because after all of this, the show still manages to portray Rience as a dangerous villain who's after Ciri. He handles Dandilion with ease, and would in turn do the same to Ciri. Well, that is until Yennefer shows up.
Sir, said the first ruffian suddenly, covering the lantern with his cloak and peering through the gap in the pigsty door. Someone's coming! A lass, I think. You know what to do, Ryan hissed. Put the lantern out. The reeking man released the rope and Dandilion tumbled in neatly to the ground, falling in such a way that he could see the man with the lantern standing at the door and the reeking man, a long knife in his hand, lying in wait on the other side.
I knew I'd find you here, you lazy lout. Leaving me at home to rot?
This is my wife. She has nothing to do with this. Please let her go.
If you know what's good for you, you'll leave. Now.
Almost identical. Seriously though, the contrast couldn't be any bigger. In one scenario, Ryan's whole plan falls apart because he gets distracted by a drunk woman for no apparent reason. And even if she doesn't appear to be an imminent threat, he has to dispose of her sooner or later because she would be a potential witness. You don't let the alleged wife of your hostage go. That's not gonna happen. So you might as well get rid of her sooner rather than later. While in the second scenario, he has henchmen with him, and I want to emphasize how much I appreciate Book Ryan's never going on one of his missions alone, which prevents him from getting overwhelmed, ambushed, or tricked easily. Because of that, he's already in a much more favorable position. Yet still, he isn't taking any chances. As soon as Yen is spotted, there's no doubt he will have her killed no matter what. And the funny thing is, Lauren knows that. Just listen.
He has been hired to hunt down Cyrilla of Sintra. He will take any path to get there.
But because Ryan's gets taken out by Yen, who has no magical abilities at all, the work towards making him a terrifying mage who's determined to hunt down Ciri without compromise goes out the window. Going forward, I have no reason to believe Ciri won't be able to come up with something to outsmart him. Not because she's super smart or anything like that, but because he's established to be kinda stupid. And that's a huge problem for the show going forward. On top of that, Ciri's Witcher training as well as her lessons in spellcasting don't serve as big a purpose anymore for the same reason. Why would she need to be competent if the villain is already incompetent? But alright, let's entertain the given scenario for a moment. Yen just took out Ryan's because, out of a million things he could have done, he chose to do the only thing which enables Yen to defeat him, and I want to emphasize that. If he had done nothing at all, Yen could not have defeated him.
Have it your way.
No, please don't hurt. Just leave her alone, please. She's done nothing.
One of the things that we had to grapple with, though, and we had to change from the short stories, is that in our world, Yennefer doesn't have magic. She actually has to use her wits. And it was in our writer's room that someone came up with a great idea of her swallowing a bunch of alcohol, holding it in her mouth, and actually using Rience's flames against him.
Truly brilliant. And while we're at it, what was his plan to begin with?
Burn her with that tiny flame till she's dead? I don't know, man. That would take ages, and you'd at least have to tie her up first. Otherwise, I don't see how this is supposed to work at all. Even then, she would have the chance to scream, even more people could walk in on you, the tavern could burn down, getting you into a lot more trouble than you need to be in. You just waste time and endanger your whole mission. Just cut her throat and be done with it.
But alright, he did what he did, and Yen took him out. So surely she's going to finish him. He's right there, on the ground. Come on, you can do it. Kill him. Can't be that hard. Remember, you already have super strength anyway, right? No, stop. What are you doing? So you're just gonna leave? Okay. Would be a shame if he ends up hurting people dear to you, wouldn't it? You could have prevented that. But perhaps Yen wouldn't kill people in cold blood?
If only the book, which the show is supposed to be a faithful adaptation of, not my words but Lauren's, had something to say about this. Maybe even in the same chapter? This one, the troubadour stood over the reeking man. Probably still lives. I doubt it, said Yennefer indifferently. I severed his windpipe and carotid artery. There might still be a little mama in him, but not for long. Dandilion shuddered. You slashed his throat? If, out of inborn caution, I hadn't sent an illusion in first, I would be the one lying there now.
And that's not even mentioning her throwing a fireball into the portal Ryan just jumped through. I believe the urge to protect the ones dear to her is one of Yennefer's core traits. While doing so, she can come across as ruthless or even heartless because of her determination to succeed, and therefore the way she and Dandelion escape damages her character pretty dramatically. It's all just such a shame, because the structure in the book works really well, and I believe there weren't many changes needed to make it work for the show. To begin with, a very clear hierarchy of the power level of all the different characters in the scene gets established. And with the information given to us, we can make educated guesses where someone like Geralt would be on such a scale. Dandilion is obviously at the very bottom. Next up is Rhines, who made light work of Dandilion. But he's only a mediocre mage. That's something we quickly pick up on, because he doesn't stand a chance against Yen. But here's the thing. There was no need for Rhines to be a worthwhile foe to Yennefer. Yen and Geralt are pillars of security to Ciri. As long as she's with them, she's relatively safe, which is established for Yen by how she took care of Rhines. This also means whenever Ciri is separated from Geralt or Yen, the audience has a legitimate reason to be worried for Ciri. That's literally the plot of book 2 to 5. Geralt searching for Ciri because she's being hunted, and Geralt knows Ciri's life depends on him finding her first. It's not Rhines' purpose in the story to put fear into Yen and Geralt. For that reason, it's totally fine for him to be defeated by Yen with such ease. He's hunting Ciri, which is made clear in all of his dialogue. I think we can put Ciri on a similar power level than Dandelion. And because we saw how Rhines took care of him, we know he'd be capable of doing the same to Ciri. Earlier I mentioned how Yen wouldn't leave Rhines behind without making sure he's not gonna cause any more trouble. Something the show doesn't address. Sapkowski solves this issue by having Rhines rescued by his master.
The pigsty filled with brightness again, this time golden, beaming from a bright oval, which suddenly appeared in the air. Dandilion saw Rhines spring up from the dusty floor, leap in the oval, and immediately disappear. Besides solving the logistical problem of getting Rhines out of the pigsty in one piece, the portal also serves as a hint for an individual much more dangerous than Rhines. Someone who's pulling the strings in the background. We don't know yet how powerful he really is, but he's likely a real danger not only to Ciri, but also to Geralt and Yennefer. Rhines, he was a wizard, wasn't he? Yes, but not a very proficient one. Yet he managed to escape from you. I saw how he did it. He teleported, didn't he? Doesn't that prove anything? Indeed it does. That someone helped him. Rhines had neither the time nor the strength to open a portal suspended in the air. A portal like that is no joke. It's clear that someone else opened it. Someone far more powerful. That's why I was afraid to chase him, not knowing where I would land. I think teasing a greater villain by having him cast a portal to save Rhines is a clever way to set him up. We know a certain fact about him. He's a wizard, which makes us wary about the other wizards we meet throughout the story. But for the most part, he's still a mystery. Unfortunately, all of it was made impossible because the writers thought it would be necessary to take Yen's magical abilities away. Thanks a lot. I also want to quickly mention the huge amount of world building being established in the chapter, but since I'm comparing the first chapter of a novel to a scene of the 13th episode of a show, it would be somewhat shocking to see the same amount of world building. Instead, you'd expect most of the world building to be done by the end of the first season. Therefore, I don't want to get into the world building comparison, even though there's an argument to be made about the show needing more and better world building. And with that being said,
I want to end by mentioning that I'm fully aware that adapting a book really isn't about getting every little detail right. Quite the contrary. A novel and a show are two very different types of media, with their own strengths and weaknesses, and while I generally prefer faithful adaptations, deviations to a certain extent are absolutely necessary. But is it too much to ask to not have characters to be the complete opposite of the figures they are based on? And when a character is altered at the very beginning of a story, the change will have a huge ripple down effect. Their later actions are informed by the character established early on, but when the established characters are fundamentally different, their later actions need to be altered as well, otherwise the actions won't make the slightest bit of sense. This means the further we get into the story, the looser the adaptation will become, until nothing of the adaptation itself will remain. And from what I've seen so far, the show has very little hope to be good whenever it deviates too much from its source material. This is certainly the case for the interrogation scene, and the reception of the later episodes and also of season 3 seemed to prove me right as well.